My name is Janet Schuchter. It's wonderful to see everybody here. I know we're all excited about the main event here, Congressman Barney Frank. I'm Janet Schuchter. I'm the chair of the Wakefield Democratic Town Committee, and on behalf of the committee, we'd like to welcome everyone here. A few housekeeping details. Please silence your mobile devices. We'd appreciate that. There are bathrooms down the hall where you came in, located by the table there. If you'd like to learn more about the Wakefield Democratic Town Committee, we are always interested in having new members. There's some information at the table you can take a look at, and also talk to me, talk to any of the folks here. We would love to share our information and share the spirit of tonight, where we're all looking to find ways to make sense of politics and our country these days. I'd like to welcome some of our elected officials. We have State Senator Jason Lewis here. Our State Representative Paul Broder. We have from the Board of Selectmen, although that's going to be a different name, I hear soon. Town Council. Okay, we have Maureen Butt. We have, there she is. Ann McGonigal Santos. Mr. Paul Donaco. Our town administrator is here, Mr. Steve Mayo. And we have from the school committee, we have Chris Callanan and Greg Liakos. We also have Jack Havlick, who is a library trustee. And from out of town, from Melrose, we have Gail Inferna from the Melrose Board of Aldermen. Thank you all for coming. So, very exciting to welcome our special guest tonight, Congressman Barney Frank. He began his career, I'll just tell you a little bit about him, even though I know people in this audience are very familiar with his work and his character and specialness. Barney began his career as a public servant as the chief assistant to Mayor Kevin White. In 1972, he was elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives, where he served for 8 years. In 1980, he ran for the United States House of Representatives, replacing Father Drinan, who had left Congress at the command of the Pope. He served in the House of Representatives from 1981 to 2013. In 1992, Congressman Frank authored Speaking Frankly, a book that one might say aptly describes Barney's reputation to say it like it is, with sharp insight, pungent frankness, and perfect clarity. Throughout his career as a congressman for the 4th Congressional District, he's been described as brainiest, funniest, most eloquent member of the House, a true workhorse. We know him for his leadership on the House Financial Service Committee and the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010. Frank's commitment to civil rights issues, gay rights, same-sex marriage, pro-choice, the environment, medical marijuana, the military is well known. He worked on key legislation to help sponsor these issues and causes. I could go on, but we want to hear from the man himself. If you want to learn more about him, I invite you to read his book that came out, I think, in 2015, called A Life in Politics, From the Great Society to Same-Sex Marriage. It is my pleasure to introduce Congressman Barney Frank.
Thank you, John. Thank you, and I want to thank all of you, particularly the active members of the town committee. One of the things that is troubling about contemporary political discussion is the failure to understand how important parties are to a functioning democracy. Of course, anything can be carried to excess, but it troubles me that if you are doing any kind of a word search and you want to find the word partisan used in a favorable context, you have to go to a history of World War II and read about the Yugoslav opponents of the Nazis. They were the partisans. Actually, they were led by Marshal Tito, and it didn't end as well as it might have. But anytime people said, well, he's partisan, as if that was a bad thing. Never in the history of the world has there been a self-governing large group of people where you didn't have political parties. The opposite of political parties is just pure personality. Nobody, no human being alive can be well informed about the public policy positions or character of everybody who runs for every office. That's especially true around here where we elect things like register of probate and register of deeds, jobs which nobody knows what they do, or in most cases who they are. They're perfectly nice people, but electing them is ridiculous. You need parties, they are a guide. Obviously, they shouldn't be done without some flexibility. What's happened in America actually has been an excess of partisanship, but let me begin with this, because one of the arguments is there are a couple of things that I advise people not to say, sort of old sayings. The most important is this really dangerous practice when things are going bad, to take the easy way out and say, oh, a plague on both our houses. If there is equal guilt somewhere, fine, but if there is not, saying a plague on both the houses is a great gift to the guilty. And with regard to partisanship, it is not a case of plague on both the parties and the houses consequently. By the way, if you're curious, the other thing I advise people not to say anymore, and it's been reinforced, is don't describe an extremist as someone who is more Catholic than the Pope. The problem with that is that these days a lot of bishops think they are more Catholic than the Pope. So that one's lost some of its force. But although I hope everybody noticed Steve Bannon, Trump's guru, spiritual advisor, who is a man so mean-spirited that he is not only totally devoid of any compassion, but does not understand what compassion is and cannot recognize it in someone else. He just said that the reason members of the Catholic hierarchy are in favor of allowing people who are troubled and oppressed into America is that they need people to fill the pews. And in particular, they're looking for the money they bring in. Everything else aside, the notion that these people that he is trying to exclude really have a lot of money to give away is just stupid. But this is a man who not only has no compassion for troubled and oppressed people, including children, he can't even understand that other people do. But what I want to talk about a little bit is party, and it's relevant for this. Let me give you the nub of what I want to say. I want Democrats to be optimistic. I think we are well on the way to coming back from a kind of political downpoint, and in particular, I think the chances are increasing that the Democrats will be back in the majority in the House. And I can tell you that members of the House think that as well. Donald Trump just did us a big favor. I'm about to write this for my blog in CNBC. One of the major weapons the Republicans have been using and plan to use next year in the House is to demonize Nancy Pelosi. Donald Trump just embraced her. Fortunately for her, it was a metaphoric embrace, which you cannot take for granted. But he not only agreed with the idea of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer about how to deal with the budget, the next day he announced publicly that she asked him to please show some compassion for these young people who were facing deportation as a result of him now, people who were brought here when they were kids. And he did what she said, and he gave her credit. He sent out a telegram saying, don't worry. That's going to make it very hard for them to demonize Nancy Pelosi. You all remember our disappointment when we didn't win that Georgia seat. Ossoff was ahead, and the Republicans then responded, as we knew they would, in part by saying that, you don't want to send a Nancy Pelosi clone to Congress. Nancy Pelosi's been a great speaker. In fact, the record is clear. She is the only person to serve as Speaker of the House since Tip O'Neill, whose reputation survived the speakership. Everybody else either got thrown out, defeated for re-election, forced to quit, or in one notable case, went to prison. Nancy Pelosi did that by, and again, doesn't get enough credit. We talked about Hillary Clinton being the first woman president, sadly she wasn't. There are three major governmental positions in America, the presidency first of all, but then the majority leadership of the Senate and the speakership afterwards. In the history of the country, only one of them has been a woman, and that's Nancy Pelosi. And in fact, she was so effective as speaker in the 2 years where we had the Congress and the presidency that the agenda of the Trump administration is to a very large extent trying to undo what she helped us do in 2009 and 10. Financial reform, repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and of course, health care. But that doesn't stop you from being demonized. Look, you lived in Massachusetts. One of the logical things would be for people who were presidents of the Senate or speakers of the House to go on to be governor. In fact, if you look at most states, and I've been trying to do this systematically, that is very rare. And I know this is true for Pennsylvania, California, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. Speakers of the House, President of the Senate, almost never get elected governor. Because when you become a legislative leader, you make a trade-off. You help get public policy done, in part by taking the heat for your members. Legislatures are not popular, individual legislators are. So you take legislative leadership, and that's a bargain you're making. Only one of the legislative leaders, majority leader or speaker, has even run for president recently. That was Bob Dole. They can't even get the nomination. And literally that goes back, and it's true. We have a lot of very sophisticated political people here, and you're familiar with Massachusetts history. Think of Senate presidents and speakers who've run for office and they never win. I'm pretty sure that the last man who went from the speakership, the legislature, I think it was the speakership to the governorship, was Leverett Saltonstall, who retired in 1966. Anyway, it was easy to caricature Nancy, but we paid a price for it. But Donald Trump has just demonized her. Donald Trump has just said, well, you know what, she had a great idea. We're doing what she said with regard to the debt limit, spending, very important issues. And so I say now, if I'm a Democratic candidate, I'm running, and I get attacked because people on the right say, oh, you're going to go down and vote with Nancy Pelosi, the answer would be, yeah, like Donald Trump. I'm going to be a supporter of Nancy Pelosi just like Trump is. I'm serious. I am sure that the Republicans who are planning their House campaign next year were very angry at that. But that's one reason why I'm optimistic. I'll make a prediction now. I think it's going to become clearer that Donald Trump won't mind and, in fact, may continue to do things that will help the Democrats run the House. I think he is so frustrated by the inability of the Republicans in Congress to get things done, ignoring his own part of the blame for that, that he would be just as happy to have a Democratic House. So, not both houses. So that he can run in 2020 as the poor victimized outsider. And I think this is because he's been doing things that help us. He attacks the Republican Congress. Within the last couple of days, several less conservative Republicans, there really aren't very many moderates left, but several of the less conservative Republicans just announced they're not running again. Because they tend to be in districts which are less conservative, and they're caught between a rapidly pro-Trump electorate in the primary and a very angry anti-Trump majority in the final. So I think the result of Trump's boorishness, incompetence, inability to function, that I think we are very likely to maybe take the House back and clearly come back. And Trump has been in some ways a gift to us. What he's done is to discredit the philosophy, philosophy makes it too coherent, the set of emotions that brought him to power. Essentially, and this is one of the problems we've had, we're the party of government, we Democrats. And in many parts of the world, people who were seen as supporters of government got beat because people became convinced that government sucks. What Trump has done has demonstrated, I believe, to an increasing number of people that while government may suck, not having a government sucks even worse. Healthcare is now popular for the first time. I think he's giving us this opportunity to show what we can do. We have to be ready if we take power to then do it. We have to show. But I want to go back to my partisanship argument. When you get hit with, a plague on both the houses, both sides. In 2007, the Democrats took control of the House and Senate for the first time since '95. George W. Bush was president. As 2007 went on, it became clear that there were some economic problems. We didn't see the terrible financial crash right away, but we saw a slowdown in the economy. So here's what happens. In January of 2008, George Bush goes to Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leaders, and says, we got to slow down the economy. I need your help. I need to do something to stimulate the economy. Now, the partisan response, what Barack Obama got from the Republicans was, oh, good. How can we make it worse? Pelosi and Reid said, okay, yeah, you're right. We gotta help. I mean, here's the advantage the Republicans have had until Trump came in power. They have the advantage of the non-mother in the Solomon story. Remember, two women appear before King Solomon claiming to be the mother of the baby, and he then says, okay, there's only one way to respond, to deal with this, I'll cut the baby in half. At which point the real mother says, oh no, I'll give up because I really care about the baby, and so then she gets the baby. Well, think of government as the baby, the electorate as King Solomon, and the Republican Party as the mother who's ready to see it cut in half. We're the real mother. We're the ones who say, when we've been threatened by the Republicans with a shutdown of this, that we've given in too much, because we see the harm that comes. We have not been able, in our own consciences, to exploit. So in 2008, in January, Pelosi and Reid said, yeah, it's the people we care about the most who can least able to defend themselves. They'll be killed by this recession. We got to help them. So they helped Bush put together a stimulus plan, one that he liked. It had a lot of tax cuts, although Pelosi and Reid made sure that it helped lower income working people as well. And then as 2008 wore on, the Bush appointees at the Federal Reserve and the Secretary of the Treasury came to those of us in Congress, I was chairman of one of the committees, and said, we got big trouble, we gotta fix the regulations. And while we were working with them on that, the bottom fell out in 2008, in September. And Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke, Secretary of Treasury Paulson came to the Congress and said, here's what we got to do. And what they proposed was the TARP program, which I will acknowledge. Well, let me say this about the TARP program. I think history will show it to have been one of the most highly successful, wildly unpopular things the government ever did. What Pelosi and Reid asked us to do was to say, hey, look, now, remember, this is happening 2 months before the 2008 election. If we were they, we would have said, oh, isn't that too bad, the economy's collapsing, and gone home, and let the economy collapse and reap the political benefit. Instead, we damaged ourselves, frankly, because we helped George Bush keep things from collapsing. We tried to do it in the most humane way, and we kind of paid the price for it. You know, one of the things you'll hear is, oh, you Democrats, you're the party of bailouts. There were 5 bailouts in that period, of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, of the Bear Stearns Company, of the AIG Company, of the banks in general, and of the automobile industry. Every one of those 5 bailouts was initiated by George W. Bush. 2 of them he started and finished on his own without Congress. 3 we helped him. But we get blamed for it. So we've been blamed for government. And that was their great advantage. They can't do that anymore. That's why I think Trump won't mind if we take over one of the houses. Because right now, they can't blame us for anything. They can complain, but the more they complain, the weaker they look. Oh, those nasty minority Democrats, they won't give us some votes. And by the way, Pelosi and Schumer and the Democrats in general thank your excellent representative, Kathleen Clark, thank our senators, Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren. He's right, they haven't given them a vote on anything important. And that's intensified the pressure on the Republican Party. He hasn't been able to spare any real losses because the Democrats have held firm on the major issues. He hasn't cracked a single Democrat, including people who are going to run for re-election next year in states that he carried big. So I think he wouldn't mind being able to share the blame. He has nobody to blame right now. I'm very happy to get back some power to do that. I think what we need to do, he'll still have the blame. People still blame the president. Even when the Republicans had both houses of Congress and were obstructing, people still blamed Obama. But what we need to think about is if we, say, get the majority, what do we do? One of the things that Democrats and others have thought about is, well, gee, how come a lot of working people making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, people who would benefit from Democratic policies, even low-income people who clearly would benefit from Medicaid, why don't they vote for us? What's the matter with them? I think the reason is that they don't believe that we are going to deliver. They don't believe for 2 reasons. One, we have not done enough to show we have some sympathy with them. And I'm going to give you a capsule, I hope, in my next book. But I think we sometimes people are overly rationalistic in their approach. People want benefits from the government, but they also want psychic income. People want to be told that they're good people and that what they do is worthwhile. I mean, the worst mistake Hillary Clinton made was when she said we're going to put all the coal miners out of work without couching that in better words. It's interesting, there's a disparity. We are, as a party, very sensitive to the psychic income demands of groups that have historically been disadvantaged. We haven't been as much to people who are more on the majority side. We need to be. I think that's a piece of it. The other problem we have is one that's harder for us to do something about. The other reason that people who would benefit from public policies didn't believe us that we were going to deliver. First, they doubted our commitment, and we need to show that better. But secondly, they didn't believe anybody could. One of the great problems we have today is the fact that government is so unpopular. Now, Trump is helping us because he's making people miss government. And we are also getting some help from nature. The number of Texans who worry about the national debt has dwindled very significantly in the last month. People understand that there are some things in a civilized society only government can do, and that is helpful. But the problem here in part is the media. And The media has a terrible bias, not left and not right. It has a negative bias, and it's been exacerbated by the internet. I am not a great internet watcher. I don't do a lot of Facebook because I have no interest in where anybody else has had lunch. But I know enough about what does go on, and I am sure that I am right when I say that no clip of a United States Senator praising a cabinet member for doing a good job has ever gone viral. Nice doesn't sell on the internet about human beings. About cats it does, but not about human beings. The negative bias of the media is unrelenting. And that includes people, by the way, who say, oh, they're on the left. I think Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert damaged our ability to get good public policy, because both of them, Colbert's a little different now that he's got a different show, but during the period, say, when Obama was president, almost all of what they did was to document the mistakes and the evils and the incompetence of government. Now, each individual statement was correct, but not very little good ever happened on those shows. And to check out my perception, I got the book, An Oral History of the Daily Show. And I did what I often do with books about politics, which is to go to the index. Much of the time, I will tell you, I go to the index for a reason you can probably guess. It's what's called literally a Washington read. A Washington read is to turn to the index of a book and look for your name. I can tell you as a result of that, that just about every book written about politics in America mentions Benjamin Franklin. And the reason I know that is when I'm looking for my name and I haven't found it, and I get to Benjamin Franklin, then I can stop because I know I'm not in it. But I looked up Obama in the index to the Jon Stewart book. First of all, there were 3 references, all of which were negative to Obama. And then there was a 4th in which they expressed their concern, their worry. How are we going to be critical of this guy? We agree with him too much. And instead of saying, isn't this wonderful, we have a president we like, it's, oh my God, we're attackers. We're going to have to work harder to figure out a way to attack this guy. You see it on local television. All the local televisions have these investigative teams. And the investigative teams are all there to show what government did wrong. And now people have said to me, well, you know, it's not a story if the plane lands successfully, it's only a story if it crashes. That used to be true. But if people believe that most planes crash, then it is a story when things go well. In fact, it is a story in many cases that government is a success. And you see there was the president's health care bill. You know, if anybody here, you're teaching in a college, you're a student or you know some, here's a good paper topic, which nowadays with obviously computer research you can do this. Look up references to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever they call it in these things. Look up references to them prior to this year. And I bet you they are overwhelmingly negative stories about problems. And then look at it this year, and they're good stories, because they're stories about people who now know what they're going to lose. I can't control the media. But what we can do is this, and I have this plea to people on the liberal side, on the left. Be critical when appropriate of specific government actions, but please don't fall into government bashing. Don't fall into, oh, it's all terrible, etc. Because that reinforces our problem, that even if we were able to persuade people in Ohio and Michigan, victims of policies that have hurt them economically, that we have proposals to help them, that we do care about their plight. I think we can do that. We will run into that skepticism that any of it will work. Now, we're in a little bit of a vicious cycle, because we can argue for improving public policies that will alleviate the inequality, but people won't believe that they're going to happen because they don't trust government. And as long as they don't trust government and vote for the anti-government people, we never get the power to do them. I think Trump could break that vicious cycle for us. I think that we may be able to win some elections now purely on the negative to Trump. So we have to have in mind what we're going to do if and when we take over. Things like, and I've been a sponsor of universal Medicare for a long time. Politically, it can be tough. What I don't understand, I got to talk to people, is why we don't do what we contemplated in 2009. As a first step, drop the age of Medicare to 55. That's not as disruptive. By the way, it helps both Medicare and the private insurance system. If you're an employer in the private insurance field and you lose your people between 55 and 65, you're losing your sickest people. And if you're Medicare and you add people who are 55 to 65, you're gaining your healthiest people. There are other things we can do. With regard to Social Security, I believe we should take the cap off, not right at 100. Anybody over 250, let them pay the full bite, and then use that to cut the payroll tax at the low level, which can help make people more employable and give them a little bit of money. Massive infrastructure, no question. He's jerking around about trying to do it privately. And the only thing you can build with private money is a toll road. You can't build a free good with private money. But that would put all kinds of people back to work, and it would be very helpful for the economy. You know, we talk about productivity, and nobody knows, it's hard to figure out how to improve it. One way you improve productivity is to let people spend less time trying to get places. Let goods get places more quickly. So I believe we could put through a very useful program. And one more I would like to add, which is to help build middle and lower income rental housing. Yes, people should be helped to buy homes, but helping renters in a lot of places would be useful as well. I think Trump has given us the ability to do that. So let me just summarize. I want to throw this open. I think we can capitalize on his discrediting the notion that government is doing the wrong thing and that all you needed was somebody who cared. I think his poll numbers are very low. The Republicans' poll numbers are very low. He's going to continue. He attacks the Republican Congress. You're a Republican congressman running for re-election. Okay, you voted to kill the Consumer Bureau, one of the most popular things we ever did, Elizabeth Warren's idea. You voted for a health care bill that Trump said was mean. He's blaming you for not being able to do anything. He's taken away your ability to say that Nancy Pelosi is evil because he's made her one of his best friends. I think we have a chance to do much better. So I know people are pessimistic. And that includes, by the way, and I will say this, I was very sorry that Donald Trump got elected. But I would be almost as sorry if he were to leave office before his term ends, because I think Mike Pence would be no moral improvement and would not be as big a target. I think Trump's total, colossal incompetence and unattractiveness, failure to think strategically, those are great assets. So I think we can take advantage of those. And I would also say, and this is in your own thing, please don't join in government bashing. Talk about specific things government doesn't do well, but talk about things government does well. Write about those things. Spread that word. As I said, Trump has given us an opportunity now to get somewhere in a positive way. And I return to where I began. We're going to do it because of people like the people in this room, people who understand that political parties are an essential part of self-governance. They have been in every, the founding fathers had two views about political parties. One, they hated them, and two, they were forming them from the very first moment. And that's true in every other polity. So thank you for what you do, and I think people should go out and be proud of your role in the political process as one of the two major parties. Talk up what we do, and I think we have bottomed out in terms of the kinds of things we care about, what we want to do, and good times are ahead. Thank you. I'll take questions now. What I can do is, I can repeat the question if people can just ask, anybody wants to ask, and I'll repeat it if people can't hear it.
So let me see. So we have our high school students, Talat and Amanda. Barney, you should know, these are fabulous high school students who have just done wonders at forming this high school Democratic group, and so they're going to be running around with the microphones to people who have questions.
I appreciate that. When I was in high school, I campaigned for Adlai Stevenson, running for president. But I'm always struck when I speak and there are high school students present. That was in 1956. That was, what, 61 years ago. So meeting you here today, when I was campaigning for him 61 years ago, that would have been the equivalent of me in 1956 meeting someone who would campaign for William Jennings Bryan in 1895. So I'm glad to have you here no matter how you make me feel. Well, they won't easily. That's why you might kind of do it, sort of dwindle them. That's why I think the best way to go forward is to drop Medicare to 55. But it's not just private insurance companies. There are labor unions who are proud of what they've been able to accomplish in healthcare. But I think if you drop Medicare to 55, you reduce that. And there may be other ways to expand public offerings. That's why, no, it's not going to happen right away. It'd be very disruptive. People would lose their jobs. If the votes aren't there politically, you would have to phase it in. And once you start announce that you're phasing it in, you begin to have a problem of people leaving the system. So I think the approach is find ways to expand the public role. And at one point I thought, well, you know what we do? We increased Medicaid in the Obama health care plan. We expanded the number of people eligible for Medicaid by income. And then you reduce the age to 55. So if you kind of raise the lower level and drop the upper level, at some point you may squeeze it out. But I think the best thing to do, I'm not sure exactly, it's not gonna be easy to force people. Give people that experience and see what happens. Do it gradually. So that means that if you're and this is, I think, it's attrition. If we were to drop Medicare to 55, insurance companies would presumably respond by reducing their rate of growth. They wouldn't be hiring as many people. I mean, that's my view, by the way. I think we spend way too much on the military. Once they have agreed to build a major weapons system, then, by the way, you know, I know you're reading about how we're in such trouble. The largest air force in the world is, of course, the U.S. Air Force. This is still true, although China may challenge it. But do you know what the second largest air force in the world is? The U.S. Navy, yeah. So, you know, the U.S. Air Force is the largest, U.S. Navy is the second. Unless they are planning to have a war, I don't understand why the need is so overwhelming to increase one or the other. But the way you do that is you don't stop them from building systems they're already building. Just don't start any new ones. And I think that's the way to deal with it. Expand the public role, diminish the private role, and at some point we may hit crossover.
I love the idea of lowering the age to 55 for Medicare and then upping Medicaid. Is that likely to be part of the Democratic platform?
I'm a little puzzled by it's not being talked about more. We actually tried to do that, and at one point in the health care bill, the Democrats were ready to do that, and then Joe Lieberman, who said he was for it, backed down. One danger there is that you will have people, Senator Sanders and others, insisting that it's all or nothing. I hope that won't be the case. I mean, the argument people dismissive of it. No good public policy was ever adopted in one fell swoop. And when you do something partial, it has two benefits. First of all, people say, well, if I can't get it all, I don't want any of it. First of all, you show that it'll work. You got Medicare to 55, there are that many more people who understand the benefits of that versus private insurance. Secondly, you help people. So I would hope that there would not be this kind of opposition. I don't think there would be. I think there's a very real chance if the Democrats take the House that we could, that they should do that. I'm lobbying for that.
Congressman, thank you for coming to Wakefield. My question is, your comment about government bashing made me think of how some of our colleagues on the left made me think about how some of our colleagues on the left say that Democrats are partly responsible for Betsy DeVos and public education by virtue of our criticisms of the public schools, teacher unions, and our embrace of high-stakes testing and charter schools. What do you think of that argument, and is there a new direction for the Democrats on education policy?
Well, I think what the Democrats ought to do is, first of all, and this is something I feel very strongly, we should resist any effort to discuss the results of the public school education system as if the kids lived in a vacuum. Teaching a kid who has no decent place to sleep, who's hungry, who's got a noisy place, I mean, no, we ought to be very clear. Kids are in school a fairly small part of their lives. And we should know that it's a very important point to make. Secondly, I think it is legitimate to talk about excess. There's one mistaken view, which is, oh, if I admit any weakness on my side, I'm going to lose altogether. No, that's the opposite. If you don't admit a weakness, then you endanger your whole operation. For example, there was this situation in New York City where they had what was called the rubber room, where there were teachers who couldn't teach or were getting paid. That's wrong, and we should say that. So the thing to do is to look at specifics without demonizing the whole system. As to the hyper testing, I voted against the No Child Left Behind testing requirement. I think that one has been proven not to be as big an issue. As to the vouchers, my answer has been, look, if you think that these are schools that are so much better, fine, do it for everybody. The notion that you handpick is a small notion. So the basic argument would be I continue to defend public education, but don't defend everything. Don't defend, and here's the deal I would say to my friends in the teachers union. I was always pleased to have their support. But I say this to others. It's an important point. And I can say this because I've been saying it for 40 years to other lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. I've spent much of my time, I filed the first gay rights bill in the history of Massachusetts in 1972, my first year in the legislature. We got 11 votes that year out of 240. So I have no apologies to make about all that. I should have come out earlier, but even when I wasn't out, I was still a gay rights advocate in pursuance of one of my principles, which I mentioned before, how to be an honest politician. I don't think any human being can obey every law that we have. We have so many, and some of them are silly. I do believe if you are someone who has participated in the making of the laws that bind other people, you are morally obligated to obey every law that you voted for. That's my definition of an honest politician. I've been very critical of other gay and lesbian people for the way in which they go about things. I talked about psychic income. When you, and I've said this to people, if you have elected officials who are clearly committed to your cause and will, if they are successful, help you accomplish your goals, why do you insist that they phrase those in a way that's most obnoxious to other people? And I would say that now, and I'm going to say it to my African-American friends. And again, I'm very proud of my record there with the Legislative Black Caucus in Massachusetts on. Do not, and I understand why people like psychic income, but don't insist on getting psychic income at the cost of real gains. No, you don't want people saying bad things about you. That's one of my other principles, which is to be an honest politician, you tell the truth and nothing but the truth. The whole truth, maybe they got to get a subpoena. But along with that, there is, of course, the rule that you should never put in an email anything you are not prepared to read in the newspapers. And I've avoided any email problems because in 1967, I learned in the Kevin White administration something that I'm told was actually originally said by Martin Lowe Masney over about 100 years ago, the boss of the old North End. And it's a maxim, many of you may have heard it, followed literally. Tip O'Neill used to say it all the time. You never write when you can talk, you never talk when you can nod, and you never nod when you can wink. And no one's ever gone to jail on any of that. But don't insist that you're, look, that was part of the problem I had with some of the Black Lives Matter things. I was not a great fan of Bernie Sanders. But when he was interrupted in a speech he was giving by people who insisted that he go no further until he said Black Lives Matter, it was ridiculous and self-defeating. It's self-defeating. You want to help your people win. People say, well, you're taking my vote for granted. I wrote a chapter in a book that was put out by a group called the Gay and Lesbian Victory Fund that helps LGBT people get elected to office. And my chapter was, do not spend a lot of your time with other gay and lesbian people. You will be tempted to do it. Because, and this is something I used to say when I was in office, not as much. People in office won't tell you this. Anytime you hear someone who tells you how much he or she likes campaigning, you're listening to either a liar or a sociopath. I mean, there is nothing enjoyable about running around begging people, asking them, well, they're busy, we should go get the hell away from them, they want to get home from work. Repeat yourself 1,000 times, be nice to boors and fools. But you do it. I mean, I wasn't as good at that as I should have been, but I tried. But why do you insist that when I said to gay and lesbian people, you'll be tempted. You'll be doing some campaigning and you'll be feeling bruised and you have been rejected and people have told you to go away. So the temptation is to go to a nice meeting of gay and lesbian people where you will be bathed in affection and love and not get a vote you didn't have when you went in. And so people say, well, and I've seen this from African Americans, gay people, others, oh, you're taking me for granted. And my answer was, for Christ's sake, if I can't take you for granted, then I can't win. If I can't, by being very supportive over the years, demonstrate my commitment, and then go out and try and win over other people, or at least neutralize them, I can't win. And that is, and I say that to the teachers' unions too. Yeah, don't insist that everybody say everything you ever done was right. But I think you are a much more effective supporter, and it is, and then a concession or two is helpful. I do think we make the base one, and I think that's the. There's a woman named Diane Ravitch. I recommend you go read her book. Diane Ravitch was an assistant secretary of education in, I think, the H.W. Bush administration. She was very much a conservative. And she was very much a anti-public schools person. And she really studied it. And she then wrote a book a few years ago repudiating that and saying no, making the case, and including the case that it is totally a non-starter to talk about improving education without paying attention to the lives of the kids you're talking about. And I will tell you from my own experience, during my years in Congress, I would go into schools. People would ask me to read to third graders, significantly annoying both me and the third graders. Last damn thing they wanted. Although, except for it was Dr. Seuss. I used to like to read Dr. Seuss. But I would go into most of the schools in my district and find excellent teachers, attentive students, and the parents were happy. I would go into the schools in the poorer areas with a high immigrant population. And yes, there were still very good teachers, but the atmosphere was different because they had a much harder job. They didn't have all these happy, smiling, well-fed, well-rested faces to deal with, and they didn't have a parental involvement. And she makes that case that trying to improve education without dealing with the terrible life conditions for so many people is cruel.
Congressman Frank, I'd like to thank you for your many years of service, both Massachusetts and to the United States, and thank you for being here tonight. You mentioned about the embracing, figurative sense with Nancy Pelosi and the meeting that they had at the Oval Office here last week. And there was a picture of actually the smiling Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi with Donald Trump to the window of the Oval Office. Given as unpredictable as Donald Trump is there any chance at all that he could backflip on what he's committed to do with the Democrats that would change your mind on what would happen here in the next 3 to 4 years?
Well, the commitment is limited to the next 3 months. There's no chance he's going to backflip there. I don't believe he is going to be consistently in that mode. He's temperamentally unable to do it. This was a very particular situation where he has no self-discipline. I think, frankly, that he doesn't like to work very hard. The notion of this terrible crisis just distressed him, and he was so glad to get away out of it. I don't think it goes any further. And in fact, I wouldn't want it to, and there's going to be fighting over the tax bill, and there are going to be other fights. There are going to be fights when stuff comes out about the Russia probe. But what he can't take back is the nice things he said about Nancy. There's this picture of him beaming at Chuck Schumer. He can't undo that. I just do not think he can. He can go back and be critical of Nancy Pelosi, but they will never again be able to make her into this terrible source of evil. It just doesn't work. She will be able to counter, and I think that's all I expect from it. I don't think it has any ongoing possibility, but I don't care if it doesn't.
How should Democrats be going about talking about global warming and climate change? This has been a big failure, it seems.
Oh, I think we should talk very much about how bad it is. They're obviously hurt by it. You notice that the head of EPA said it was insensitive to talk about climate change in Texas. I would say here's the deal, and it's what the mistake Hillary made. Just don't blame people who are working in those industries. I mean, don't blame them for it. Don't make it seem like they're doing bad things. Talk about the issue and talk about ways to compensate people, find other jobs for them. I think that's, in the environmental area, I think that's our biggest mistake, again, is to kind of conflate the negative environmental impacts of things with the motives of the people who are doing them. People who drill for oil aren't bad people. People who mine coal aren't bad people. I would do that, and I would say, and we're going to try to find ways of compensation. Although, let's not be unrealistic. You're not going to make a 53-year-old coal miner into a programmer. Part of what we have to do is for people who are going to be losing jobs like that, lessen the negative impact by having public policy programs. But I think this is a case of the rhetoric. Talk about this as a shared problem and be regretful that these things are happening. But don't even come close to blaming people. Well, I'll tell you, I, 2010, tough year, they're going after us. One of the reasons I survived by 11%, a lot of people, and I was the target because of the financial stuff, were people in New Bedford, including the fishermen. And I think many of my environmentalist friends made a terrible mistake by insulting the fishermen. It was possible to talk about the problems of overfishing while noting that these were very brave people who were risking their lives and doing very hard work for their families. And it was unfortunate that we're in a context in which we may have to diminish that. But there was this angry rhetoric about them, which was a terrible mistake. Why don't you stand closer?
I recently read Freedom Summer, and I was amazed.
By Bud McCord?
Yes. I was amazed by your involvement at such a young age and the bravery that you showed. I don't know where I was at that time. Maybe I was too young to.
1964.
Yeah, I was still in high school and stupid, I guess. But I just was amazed at such a young age that you took that stand and went down there. And I read about the incident in the van that you were involved in, taking a truck or a van.
You know, with the star of West Side Story. Richard Bamer. That was 1964, what's known as the Mississippi Freedom Summer, the one in which 3 young men were killed. James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman. Goodman, by the way, as in Bergdorf Goodman, he was a member of that family. And I went down, I'd been involved with various civil rights groups and spent 7 weeks there. There was a point where I was asked to sort of help drive a truck full of material to a place from one part of Mississippi to another. The volunteer who was driving it was a man named Richard Bamer, who was an actor. He played the male lead in the movie of West Side Story. Yeah, I just, well, look, I don't talk about it a lot, but I would say this. I do plan to ask my friends, people on whose behalf I fought in various minority groups, gay and lesbian people, African Americans, people with disabilities, to take this approach. Yes, continue to insist on full support of the public policy measures you need, and insist on being treated with respect. But for people who are running in areas where sentiment is not overwhelmingly automatically in your favor, please make allowances for the way in which they say it. Please make allowances for their accommodating themselves to political reality, because if you succeed in getting them defeated, you're going to be worse off. And I will draw on my background for doing that. But yeah, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Help. But that was true. I was in Mississippi in the summer of 1964, and if you were black and in Mississippi at that time, you might as well have been in South Africa. You had no rights. You literally had no rights, no protection against the police. You couldn't vote. I mean, it was just awful. And I'll tell you why we were there. It was a man named Alan Lowenstein, who was a great agitator in the very best sense of the word. It was the fall before 1963, he'd been active at both Yale and Stanford. He got a bunch of Yale and Stanford students to go to Mississippi to help a man who was running for governor of Mississippi. His name was Aaron Henry. He was the president of the NAACP. And historically in Mississippi, if you were black and you tried to participate in politics, you were economically destroyed, physically beaten, and in several cases simply murdered. And so he brought these, and nobody cared. I mean, the rest of America was indifferent to that. And he brought these white kids down, and all of a sudden, it became news when civil rights workers were getting beaten up in jail, because they were white kids from Connecticut, and California and Illinois. And so they had this idea, okay, here's what we can do. How do we crack this hard shell of racism and indifference? So the program called the Mississippi Freedom Summer recruited hundreds of white kids from all over America, some black kids as well, but white kids mostly, to go to Mississippi, understanding that that was the only way to make this an issue that people outside of black Mississippians would care about. So that's what I was doing then. In some ways, we were kind of, bait. And three guys were killed, one black and two white. But it did lead to the thing ending.
Thank you, Congressman, for coming to Wakefield today. Can you share your thoughts on what you think is going to happen with DACA and the 800,000 Dreamers we have in America?
I am worried about DACA. Reading today, part of it is people letting Trump a little bit off the hook. He needs to be pressed to say, okay, you've asked Congress to act. What do you recommend? The president is not allowed simply to say, here's an issue, guys. He's not the ref throwing up a jump ball. He should be an advocate. If he were to come out in favor of it, well, I take it back. There was one good thing today. He did apparently, his legislative guy apparently said yesterday that they're not insisting that it be part of a deal for the wall. So I guess I'm moderately optimistic that there'll be enough political pressure and public pressure for them to do it. And the question, if it gets close, that's 6 months, it's up to him. He can go very slow with it. On the other hand, a lot of the hardline Republicans are against it. The House Judiciary Committee chairman is against it. I'd say there's enough public pressure so that probably, well, the very fact that Trump did what he did rather than just end it as he said he would is a good sign. And I guess I think there's a probably 60–70% chance it goes through, but it could just fail. Although I'll tell you what, it could be a two-phase thing. It may not make the 6 month, and once they start deporting these kids, then I think it may happen, but only after, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of lives get screwed up.
Yeah. 30 years ago, I hosted the gay radio talk show in Boston and had the privilege of coming out to have an interview with you, and you had had a whole lot of interviews that year, and I think you weren't looking for yet another one. So it didn't start too well, and then I restarted the tape, and because I felt like I needed to tell you what the show was for and who it was for, and it was for a lot of closeted suburban and rural people, and you took a deep breath and you really poured it out and did a wonderful program for us and made a difference. And so mostly I just want to thank you for
When was this?
1987 in the fall.
I came out in May of '87, so
Yeah, so this was
an emotional time just right after that.
And you probably had a lot of lousy questions and personal and so forth. And so I just think, a person in your position, and I would have liked to have seen other people in a position to make a difference and be role models, because you never know how many people's well-being you improve and how many lives you saved. And so I know you saved quite a few, so I thank you for that. And
I appreciate that.
And also, and a question, I guess, is how you feel things are going over the last 30 years. I mean, marriage, I never saw it coming, and I don't know if you did. And LGBT stuff, trans stuff, is it, it's spiraling in the right direction?
Absolutely. In my memoir, the kind of frame that occurred to me was that when I was in my early teens, I was interested in politics early on. I went on campaign for Stevenson when I was 16. So in my early teens, I wanted to be in politics. I knew I wanted to do that. But I also knew that that was impossible in any active way because I was gay. And being, which I realized when I was 13. So at that point, what I knew was that the unpopularity of my sexuality was so great that I could never succeed in anything that was as popular and respected as public office. By the time I retired, that had reversed. Being gay was much more socially acceptable than being a congressman. And in 2012, someone told me, I'm playing with my phone, I'm afraid my husband, I might have given him bad directions. We got married in 2012, so I wanted to be sure that I was married while I was still in Congress. And I was literally told that in polling, my marriage polled much higher in terms of public approval than the Dodd-Frank Act. I am pleased to say that both have survived and are going well. But yeah, it's moved much faster than I thought it would on all levels, and I'm very optimistic about the future. There's one, it's interesting about their fallback. The right has given up trying to block us from legal rights. They do have a fallback, which is, has some danger, and especially with Gorsuch having stolen that Supreme Court seat, and that is they carve out religious rights as a justification for denying us our rights. And there's a little of that. But on the other hand, even the transgender issue, which used to be a very unpopular one, we tried to get a bill through in 2007 that included protection of transgender people as well as other sexual minorities, and we didn't have the votes for it. We had most Democrats, but almost no Republicans, and then lost enough Democrats to lose it. But then you have 2016, one of the few unexpected wins for the Democrats was for the governorship of North Carolina, where the transgender bathroom issue was an issue. By the way, there are differences not just between gay and straight people, but there are also very important cultural differences between men and women. You hear a lot of complaints about men in the ladies' room and in the women's shower room. I've yet to hear the first man to complain about women in the men's room. It is not a problem, apparently. But yeah, it's moving very quickly. The public is on our side. When I came out in '87, I said, two things occurred to me in '87, which sadly, in part and happily in part, are still there. I said at the time, it struck me with the reaction to myself. Most Americans were much less homophobic than they thought they were supposed to be. But they were more racist than they were ready to admit. And you know, that's why we started from nowhere. We have made much more progress on sexual orientation and gender identity. The major reason, of course, being that gay and lesbian people have straight relatives, and African Americans largely do not. I just read an interesting book about a scandal involving a head of the British Liberal Party who were trying to kill an ex-lover who was trying to blackmail him. But they talked about the member of the House of Lords who'd been for a long time a crusader for two things. He was trying to protect turtles, and he was also trying to enact a gay rights bill. And he started earlier on the turtles, but was not getting anywhere. But he did get the gay rights bill through. And someone said, well, how do you account for the different levels of success? He said, well, there were very few turtles in the House of Lords.
Thanks for coming tonight, and I appreciate your years of service. Always been one of my heroes in the Congress. With the last election, the Democratic Party has really cracked, and I see a divide, and I'm wondering what you think, how we can reconcile this. I know you're not on Facebook, but if you were on Facebook, you would see the people are still relitigating the election, and if this had happened, this could have happened, and so on and so forth. How do you think that we can join together and win 2018?
By focusing on what we can change. I would hope people would stop doing that. By being critical of people who do it, there's no other way around it. The question is, what are people trying to accomplish? First of all, people talk about division. The Democratic Party has been wonderfully united in the Congress. Not a single Democrat has defected in either body on health care, financial reform. They have been very united. I would hope that people would stress that. And I have very little patience for the people who want to just relitigate 2016. I don't understand what can be accomplished or want to exacerbate the difficulties. I'll tell you who I think is a great model on this is our Senator, Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth is a great unifier. She supports others based on this. But I think the answer is to, A, not indulge in that, and B, tell other people not to indulge in it, not to fall prey to it. I mean, there's no other way around it, but just to say, hey, is refighting 2016 more important than trying to protect climate change policies or preserving health care or protecting LGBT rights? I think that's the way to deal with it, is simply to be critical of that approach and ask people to please focus on what we can do about it. I mean, what are you gaining by that? What makes them do that? I understand that's there. I would hope Senator Sanders would be a little bit more outspoken in asking some of his people to end the recrimination and go forward. I think there is a tendency of some on the left to make a criticism of the Democratic Party that simply isn't true. Again, look at what's going on in Congress. Now, I was in Congress in '81 when Reagan got a lot of bad stuff through by getting Democrats to be supportive. That hasn't happened. Democrats from states that went for Trump are doing the right thing. The Democrats are overwhelmingly united on a lot of issues. And I think that's, people need to speak out who want to get things done and ask people to please knock it off.
I want to join others in giving you kudos for everything you've done over the years. I have a kind of big question. I think there's no question that there's a lack of level playing field among races. And do you have any thoughts about what it will take for those of us who are white to own the privilege, to admit the privilege we have? And
Why?
In order
who does it help if you admit your privilege?
In order to create a more level playing field.
Well, I don't understand why you have to admit your privilege to do that. Now, that's an example of what I'm talking about. Admitting that you have a privilege. By the way, some whites have privilege. Other whites, I mean, do lesbians have a privilege, white lesbians? Do white people who are handicapped have a privilege? White people who are born poor? And what's gained by it? Can we not agree on what the policies are that we should implement and not fight over what people have to again, that's a prime example of what I mean by psychic income. And by the way, yes, there are some white people who are more privileged than other white people. Are there degrees of privilege? What about someone who was born to an absent father and a drug-addicted mother who's white? Is he privileged? But I don't understand what it gains, saying, oh, I admit I'm privileged. Why not just say, here are the things that we should do, involving enforcing some rules on the police, which is a major area for us to focus on. Some forms of economic improvement that would, because minorities are still disproportionately poor, although we can make things better. As much affirmative action of the right sort as we can get past this right-wing court. But I don't understand why admitting that you are privileged is a prerequisite for doing any of those things. And I want to get people to support them. I want to get majority support. Okay. There are people who don't feel privileged. There are people who feel they've been treated unfairly by society. There are people in Fall River who had good jobs in the garment industry who lost their job because of international trade policies. Do I really want to make her say she's privileged? What have I gained by that? I would rather put my effort into persuading them to adopt the part of public policies that are supportive. And that's a prime example to me of a rhetorical fight that's harder to win than some of the more substantive ones and doesn't get us anywhere. So, if everybody, well, first of all, there are obviously people who don't agree with that. I think I have a better chance of getting them to agree to some substantive policies that will be helpful than getting them to admit that they are privileged. And the substantive policies may actually help people. Well, but tell me, why is it a good thing for people to say they're privileged? Or to make other people say it? Yes?
Can I jump in?
Because I think the white privilege. I'm not saying that the white privilege is some kind of necessity, but it's often brought up as a response in a debate or a discussion where, for instance, when folks from Black Lives Matter are arguing their case, and there's a response that says, well, all lives matter. All lives matter. And so the response to that is, well, you don't really understand.
And you think that's helpful? What is that going to do?
No.
How about this?
Yeah.
How about saying, you know what we need to do? We need to get together and get policies enforced that diminish the likelihood that there will be police violence based on this. Because that's what counts. And I don't care what people, you're into this back and forth over rhetoric that does not make anything any better. Yes?
But did you not use your privilege by going down to Mississippi and being, as you said, bait? That was you using your clout, your representation as a northern white person.
Yes, I was.
So you used your privilege
Right.
to help people in Mississippi. That's another way of flipping the...
No, but that doesn't, but if I was going to try to, my argument is that trying to persuade other people that they have a privilege was...
No, I'm not trying to say...
I wasn't, no, if you're asking me, yes, I do think it is a good thing. But by the way, I wouldn't necessarily, I was privileged. I'm gay. In 1960, well, I would tell you in 1964, thinking that I had no chance to succeed in my profession and would have a hard time finding effect, I didn't feel terribly privileged, to be honest.
You found an avenue to be active and to act.
Yeah, but it had nothing to do with my feeling privileged.
But
It was a right.
that's you found a path to politics. You found a path.
Right, but it had nothing to do with my being privileged. I found a path based on my sense, my moral view that there were things that were wrong and should be corrected. I didn't have to admit that I was privileged to do it. I had to say that I thought there was something that could be fixed. I recognized that there was this political situation in which you had more people caring about white people in the North than elsewhere. But you just complicate it and I don't get anywhere. Yeah, I said, I think I can be helpful by going down there and fixing that situation. I did think that the oppression that black people in Mississippi faced was worse than the oppression I faced about being gay. But I will tell you, I never thought of this in terms of being privileged or not privileged, or found it useful to argue to other people that they were privileged or not privileged.
But if you look at generations of the last few generations of black men were more likely than not going to be incarcerated.
Yes.
And it means that when you and I drive down, I actually experienced this today. I was in Roxbury today. There were a lot of cops.
What does it gain by, I understand the reality.
Acknowledging the truth.
Yes, I acknowledge the truth. No, that's not all. That's not all at all.
But you're acknowledging it. I was asking.
No, I'm acknowledging something different. I am acknowledging that there is racism. I am acknowledging that black people are unfairly treated in a number of ways. But forcing every white person to say that he or she is privileged, when he or she may, in fact, not feel very privileged for good reason, because there are people with a variety of circumstances. And there are some black people today who are better off than some white people. And that's a whole debate that's unnecessary. I agree with you. I'm not conceding this to you. Yes, there's racism, and we want to try to fight it in the institutions. There's inequality. But I do not see for an instant how that is better if every white person says I am privileged, including some who legitimately feel that they've been badly treated, nor does it gain anything. I want to do the substance. So you're asking people, you're putting something like, suppose somebody wants to support the policies, but doesn't feel privileged. Should we tell them, oh, I'm sorry, we don't accept your support? Okay. No, but that's, have you tried to get white people to admit their privilege? See, here's where I totally disagree with you. Trying to get some white working class guy who's been thrown out of work to admit that he's privileged is a lot harder than getting him to say, you know what, let's get some policies like reducing the age of Medicare and other things that will promote equality. That's what I'm saying to you. You're singling out the hardest thing and the thing that does the least.
Okay.
Have you tried to, well, let me ask you though, have you tried to persuade people that they're privileged?
I've actually thought about.
Oh, you thought about it, but you haven't done it.
No, I have not. I have not done it. But
I will tell you, well,
I know there are people who are doing it in the.
come back to me when you've had some success with them and try the experiment. I'm sorry, but this is an important example. Try to persuade them to support some policies. Divide them up. Get your control group. Try to persuade some people to support the policies and other people to admit they're privileged. I'll bet you'll find it easier to do the first.
I think it's important to acknowledge that it exists, and I think that's what she's trying to say.
That what exists? Racism, I admit it exists.
Yeah, that
But, no, but that's not what she's trying to say.
it is, but just to
No, I'm sorry, but,
it exists. It exists. It's a way to acknowledge it exists, and also that.
it's how you phrase it that's important. Saying that this is a society in which people are treated unequally because of their race is different than saying I am privileged, because not everybody is. And I don't understand what you gain. You want psychic income. You want to feel, oh, let's make people feel bad. Well, there are ways, some people say, hey, I didn't do anything to bring this about. Many of them didn't do anything to bring it about. And so I would say why not try to, well, nobody's denying that there are situations that needs to be improved. I just do not understand why asking every white person to acknowledge that he or she is privileged is useful.
I don't think the idea of privilege has anything to do with policy. It's absolutely two different things. One is based on ethics, your policy. Doesn't make any difference where you come from, it's what you feel is right. And your passion can create the policy, along with other people who feel that same passion. Whereas privilege is just a word.
As I said, I want to focus on the policies.
I had a question. If we could, I had something on a totally new subject. Over here, Mr. Frank?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let's hear it. There's a lot going on in North Korea these days, and a lot to be worried about. How do you think it's going to, do you think we're going to be at all successful in trying to curtail this aggression? Or
It's
been going on
obviously a
such a long
terrible
time through
situation.
Republican and Democrats, and it doesn't seem like anybody.
Yeah,
gets
I think the South Koreans are obviously going to use a lot of influence to prevent any American initiation of violence. And I am hoping that Kim Jong-il, who is a terrible person, but at least has some sense of self-preservation. Because I noticed the South Koreans have talked about this today. If he uses violence, he dies. There's no question about that. Maybe many more of his people, maybe they would just be able to arrow it to him. And I'm hoping that he is deterred from doing anything. And I think that's what's the element of stability in the situation. That as contentious as he is on our ways, he's not suicidal. And that's the, I mean, actually the one guy who said that, I hate to say, was right on one, it was Bannon. That he's not going to do something that would lead to his death and the death of everybody near him and maybe a lot of his people. It's not as clear that he cares about them. I don't see any other way around it. Maybe the Chinese can be persuaded to pressure him. It's not clear they can. So, no. They rarely do. They do sometimes. They did in Iran. They did against South Africa. I don't think he cares enough about the welfare of his people for them to work. I get time for one more?
Hi, thank you for coming. Sorry. While Ted Kennedy was alive, I never believed in term limits. And then Mitch McConnell got reelected. And last Sunday, I think John McCain said something that to me sounded really honest. And I'm like, well, because he's not going to run again. So I wonder what your thoughts are on term limits.
So in other words, you think democracy is a bad thing and that the public should have less influence on elected officials? I don't, even though I don't always like it. The major reason I'm against term limits, and it would depend on how they are, is much of what we do as legislators is to influence the bureaucracy and try to help them be more responsive. And if you have term limits, you turn over, and we also have some independent expertise, you would increase the power of appointed officials and lobbyists if you had term limits. And on the whole, it's kind of given up on democracy. Thank you all.